Hey, you've come to join me for my favorite part of factoring. So first, we're going to review something that you already know, and I'm going to teach you a shortcut. And the shortcut is going to make going backwards, which is the factoring part, is going to make going backwards so much easier. Promise. So remember when we had two binomials and like we could do x times x is x squared and x times 4 would be 4x, 5 times x and 5 times 4, and then the part in the middle would add together, right? Combine like terms. So you could actually already do everything on this page, but I'm going to show you a shorter and faster way. And again, the more important part of that is that when we go backwards, kind of like yesterday, how I talked about it was like the reverse of distributive property, we're going to do the same kind of thing. We're going to go backwards. And so the shortcut is going to make going backwards make a lot more sense. Now, this shortcut doesn't work for everything. It works because all of these first terms are x's, right? They're all x's, and these are all x's, right? So it works when one of the terms is the same. It's not magical that it's x, but that the variables are the same, and it's not like 3x or 2x or something like that. So here's what we do. We square the first one, so x times x, x squared. Now in the middle, you're going to take these two numbers and add them together. So 1 plus 3 is 4x. In the middle always gets an x. And then you're going to take 1 times 3 to get the end. All right, so we're going to add to get the middle and multiply to get the end. And the middle is always an x, and at the beginning there's always an x squared. Again, if it was a different variable, of course, change the variable. So let's try more. X times x is x squared. 7 plus 2, 9x. 7 times 2, 14. X times x, x squared. 10 plus 1, 11x. 10 times 1 is 10. So far, they've all been positive. You do have to consider the sign when you add the middle and when you multiply to get the end. So x times x, still x squared. 4 and negative 1 make positive 3x. 4 times negative 1 is negative 4. So x squared, 8 and negative 2 make positive 6x, 8 times negative 2, negative 16. So next one, different signs again. This time though, negative 7, positive 2, negative 5x, negative 7 times positive 2, negative 14. So hopefully you're noticing that when the signs are different, the last number is always going to be negative. And then the middle, it depends who's bigger, because when we add, the sign of the answer depends on which one's bigger, right? Same signs add, opposite signs subtract, bigger number wins. All right, now I have two negatives. So x squared, I'm going to add those two negatives together. Negative 5, negative 1 makes negative 6x. Negative 5 times negative 1, though, when I multiply two negatives, we get a positive. And then same kind of thing with the last one, x squared, negative 4 plus negative 5, negative 9x, negative 4 times negative 5, plus 20. So pause, and then when you come back, I will have the other side filled out. So try the other side, make sure you've got this process using the shortcut. All right, I'm back with the answers. So check those out, see if you agree with my answers. I would point out, for instance, that this number 5 in the second column, you could have a 1 written here, right? Negative 1, negative 3, and positive 2. So think about what we got. When the signs were the same, the last number is going to be positive, and the middle sign would be determined by the signs, right? So 2 negatives, of course, is going to add up to a negative. 2 positives is going to add up to a positive. When the last sign is negative, there was one of each, and the bigger number had to match the middle. And it was really more like they subtracted to give you the middle, right? Because opposite signs. So you can think of it as adding, but I usually kind of think of it as when they're different, they're subtracting to be the middle. And then I make sure I have the sign of the bigger number match the middle. Okay, so if you're not finished checking those, pause, because I'm getting ready to erase. Perhaps. All right, so if you turn your page over, hopefully you realize this was in your notes. I'll make a note when I post this. It is in your notes, all right? And so now we're going to go in reverse. Now we're going to factor, so it means we're rewriting it as a multiplication problem. So our answers are going to look like the problem on the other side. All right, so 2 sets of parentheses. I always just go ahead and make 2 sets of parentheses. You're always taking the square root of the first term. Since these are all x squared, it's just an x in each. Then you need to think about what multiplies to be the end and adds to be the middle. Now, when I look at a problem like the one that's currently up here, this right there, I go ahead, I know there's going to be 2 sets of parentheses. I know there's going to be an x and an x. My next clue is that that's a negative 20. And remember, when the last part was negative, there was one of each sign. So I'm going to go 1 plus 1 minus. Doesn't really matter what order I put them in. Now I need 2 things that multiply to be 20, but when I subtract them, I get 8. So my choices are 1 and 20, 2 and 10, 4 and 5, right? Those are my factor pairs that give me 20. Which one of those would subtract to be 8? Yeah, 10 and 2. And some of you are going to come up with those much faster, and you may not ever need to make a list. A lot of times it's just going to pop in your head. If you need to make a list, be systematic, or you will dance around the pair of numbers that you're looking for. All right, so I'm going to go on down the page so that we can see what's next here. All right, so again, we'll look through that left column together, and then you're going to work on that right column. So these should look very much like our problems, like our answers to the problems on the other side. And likewise, our answers are going to look very much like those problems did. And since I'm only going to be working on one side at a time, I'll go ahead and make that nice and big. So 2 sets of parentheses. So to get x squared, we know we'd have to have an x and an x. It's a positive 15, so this tells me same signs. It doesn't tell me both positive or both negative, but it tells me they're the same. And then I look here, and then I know, they're both positive. So 2 positives. Now I want to think about what multiplies to be 15. So remember that things that multiply to make something are called factors. So think of things that multiply to be 15, and we want the pair of factors that are going to add up to 8. So it multiplies to be this and adds to be this. So 5 and 3. My only other choice that multiplies to 15 is 1 and 15. You do not want to think about all the possibilities that add up to 8, especially if they're different and there's a positive and a negative. You could have infinite possibilities. You want to think about what multiplies to be that last number. There's going to be less choices to look at. So I know I have an x and an x. Last sign's positive, so they're the same sign. And if they also add up to a positive, they're both positive. What multiplies to be 2 and adds up to 3? Well, the only whole numbers I know that multiply to be 2 are 2 and 1. By the way, you could put the 1 in the first one and the 2 in the second one. Makes no difference at all. So x and x. And you could always check these, either using the shortcut that we used on the other side of the page, or you could check them by actually doing it out the long way and distributing. But any factoring problem you can check by multiplying. So once again, 2 positives. What multiplies to be 10 and adds up to be 7? Yep, 5 and 2, or 2 and 5 if you prefer. All right, so it gets a little harder now. Not a lot harder, but a little bit. I see this negative right here, this baby, and that tells me the signs are different. So the signs are different, so I've got 1 plus and 1 minus. So because they're different, I know they're going to subtract to be the middle. They still multiply to be 12, but they subtract to be the 4. So what multiplies to 12, but when I subtract them, I get 4. 6 and 2, and the 6 has to go with the plus sign. Why, might you ask? Because I need it to be a positive 4. So the bigger number, when they're different, the bigger of the 2 factors has to match this middle sign. If I put minus 6 and positive 2, then that would be a minus 4 in the middle. All right, number 5. Once again, 1 of each. This time we're looking for 2 things that multiply to be 8. And because they're different signs, they're going to subtract to be that 2 in the middle. So what multiplies to be 8? 1 and 8, that would subtract to be 7. So 2 and 4. So 4 goes with the plus, and 2 is going to be with the minus. So far, so good, I hope. All right, I'm going to scroll down. All right, so number 6, there are 2 negative signs, but that does not mean there are 2 negatives in the parenthesis. Remember that if this last one is negative, that means when they multiply, we get a negative when the 2 numbers multiply. So that means there has to be 1 positive and 1 negative. The difference here is now the negative number is going to be bigger. So 2 things that multiply to be 12 and subtract to give me 4. And this time the bigger one's going to be the negative. So 6 and 2 are 2 and 6. So since I wrote my plus over here, I'll have to put my 2 here and my minus with my 6. My 6 with my minus. So that would give me, think about if you did the whole FOIL process, your outside would be negative 6x. Your inside would be 2x. And those 2 would add together to give you negative 4x. And of course you get negative 12. So if the constant, the last term here, if it's negative, this has to be 1 plus and 1 minus. So multiplies to be 10. And subtracts to be 9. And I say subtract, again, because the signs are different. If you want to think of it as addition, but know that one's positive and one's negative, okay. Same thing. So 10 and 1. And if that stumped you a little bit, when it's the number in 1, for whatever reason, that seems to be the one that throws people. Now think about which one would go with the positive. The 1 would go with the positive. The 10 needs to go, the 10 is the bigger number. It needs to go with the negative because this is a negative 9 in the middle. And then the last one, still got my 2 x's. Now this time it's positive 12 at the end. That tells me the signs are the same, but if they're the same and they add up to a negative number here in the middle, they're both negative. So what multiplies to be 12 and adds up to be 7, 3, and 4. Okay, so take a moment or 2 or 5, pause the video, do the right-hand column, make sure that you have that idea down. You really want to get good at these. This is going to come up a lot in Algebra 2 also. All right, hope you're enjoying the challenge. Okay, have a look, see if you agree. This is a 6 over here. I see my writing was not so good. There you go. Now, you may have perhaps here, any of these you could have written in the opposite order. The sign has to still be with the same number, but the order of the parentheses could be different. So a lot of times, because I put my plus and minus, I typically would have my plus in the first one, but there is nothing magical about that. So I can say x minus 12 and then plus x plus 2. It's the same thing as x plus 2 and x minus 12. As long as the 12's with the negative and the 2 is with the positive. All right, so next thing we're going to look at is what the assignment looks like on IXL. Alright, so this lesson is AA4, so the double A's aren't just batteries, they're factoring in this case. So again, it is AA4, and typing the parentheses isn't going to be the most fun, but so I have N and plus. If you have a dry erase board or a piece of paper, it might be nice to be able to write it on that and then type it in, because I personally like to make my parentheses and stuff first, but that's a little awkward on the computer. And to get your parentheses, you're using shift. You've already figured that out, I'm sure. So this would be N plus 4 and N plus 1. Close up that parenthesis, and it does not matter which one you put first. If I put the 1 here and the 4 there, still the same. Notice they are going to change it up and not just give you X's. So just kind of be aware of that. So again, 2 positives. I'm going to go ahead and leave that capital and see if it marks that wrong. I did it by accident, but we'll see. So 2 times 4 is 8. 2 plus 4 is 6. So far, probably the biggest challenge will just be making sure that although there's not a lot of X's, so you probably won't make that mistake. So this would be Z plus 7. And then Z plus 1. And be sure that you are closing up those parentheses. Again, this is AA4, as you can see up here, I guess. So always take a look at it before you just click submit, so you can be sure that that it does say what you want, like in case you accidentally hit an equal instead of the plus sign, or you forgot a parenthesis, or used the wrong letter. So I'm going to go ahead and skip ahead, because so far these have all been positives. I'm going to guess what happens next is that, see, we have a sign difference in the middle. So I'm like in the 40s. So now still, not a 9, but a parenthesis, K. And remember, if this is positive, same signs. So I know these are both K minus and K minus. And so then what would multiply to be 15 and add up to 8? Indeed, 3 and 5. Good. Minus 3. I have to remember that I didn't actually do the problem on IXL. And K minus 5. Alright, let's see what we got next. Alright, try that one. Of course, we know it's going to start with H. Think about your signs. I have a negative 19 for my constant, so I'm going to have one of each. I'm going to go ahead and put my plus first. What would multiply to be 19, but subtract to be 18? Well, 19's prime, so 1 and 19 are our only choices. So a positive 1, and then a negative 19. So if you add those together, including the signs, you get negative 18. If you multiply them, you get the negative 19. I don't know that it gets any harder. Just sometimes you're going to get numbers that might be a little sometimes you might get some stumpers, like, oh, I can't think of the numbers. But in general, things should stay pretty smooth. Again, 1 plus 1 minus. If the two numbers are just one number apart, it's going to be the number and 1. Then you just have to pay attention about the signs. So negative 23, because the negative needs to be bigger to give us that negative 22 in the middle. It's really liking the number and 1. So again, same kind of thing, v plus 25 and v minus 1 this time. So this time the 1 is the negative 1, the 25 is positive, so that we get that plus 24. And then in this case now, they're both going to be negative, right? Because the signs are going to be the same to get a positive 20. So I'll have negative 2 and negative 10. Okay, so if you're doing well on this one, this might be a good one, because this is really a skill that we're going to use over and over. And so if you're doing well and you get to 83 and you have time to go higher, it's a good skill to be getting some extra practice with. And it looks like even in the challenge zone, I don't see things changing much. All right, thanks. And I hope you enjoy factoring as much as I do.